Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another film theory reaction, and I guess in light of recent events, the Fallout nukes are a lie. So, I mean, if you didn't know about the Fallout TV show, I mean, what rock have you been living under? Yeah, and, I mean, with the whole show, honestly, I'm of two minds about it. One, I'm happy that this franchise that I've loved for like years and years, it's gotten more like public appreciation and that new people are discovering it and, having fun with it. But it still does suck that the show, isn't as good as it could have been. There's some things they've done in the show where what happened with Shady Sands, I'm not going to spoil it if, you haven't seen it yet. Or, some of the things, and there's like some plot holes in the show that really don't make that much sense even when you do try to think of them. But that's neither here nor there. I'm more curious about what this, film theory is about. Given what we've seen in the games, I would think that they were quite real. So, yeah, I have absolutely no idea what this is about unless this is about the retcon that the show did involving Vault Tech, which again, I'm not going to get into just for the sake of spoilers since the show is still, so new. Yeah, other than that, I don't really know what they could be referring to. I remember there was a whole thing a long time ago at this point, people questioning it's like, oh, how could this actually, the way the world is with the Fallout and stuff like that, actually happen with all the nukes. And I remember hearing something that the original developers of the first game said that when they built the world, they kind of built it where, like America and these other countries, they didn't go for big, multi, like what we have for modern nukes or stuff like that. They stuck with more basically smaller nukes, more in line with what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And those smaller bombs would actually be worse because they actually produced more fallout, and since they were so small, the fallout wouldn't be dispersed as high, so there's more likely chance it would fall back down, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, again, the nukes are a lie. I'm very confused. Yeah, why keep wasting time? Let's actually get into this then. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my game theory reaction. And with all that out of the way, let's get the thing started then, shall we?
The world of Fallout is a lie. The irradiated desert wasteland full of people struggling to survive isn't what would happen if the bombs we see in the Fallout show dropped in the real world. But the reality is so much worse. Strap on your Pip-Boys, loyal theorists, as we explore the real fallout of this great war.
Oh, okay, so they're saying it could
Welcome
be worse.
To Film Theory, the show that doesn't want to set the world on fire, he just wants to start a flame in your heart. So, believe it or not, but for as much as I love movies, I am also a lifelong gamer. I did get my start editing for Game Theory, after all, and the games I love the most? RPGs like Fallout. No joke, I had a cat named after the game director at Fallout's developer, Bethesda. R.I.P. Todd Howard, you were a good...
Yeah, not gonna lie, that's a bit creepy.
If you don't know, Fallout takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where nuclear war has destroyed most of human civilization. The few survivors have banded together in makeshift cities and raider gangs, pillaging the wasteland or inside vaults designed to keep their residents safe.
Admittedly, in the more modern games, it's been 200 years since then, so civilization is starting to claw its way back, but it's not as far along as you think it'd be.
That right there is Vault 4's 3-foot thick lead casing, strong enough to keep out the rads. And the reds.
And all of that is wrapped in a pretty bow of a retro-future aesthetic, dark
humor,
I
love
and
the
over-the-top
aesthetic.
violence. This is one franchise that does not pull its punches. So why are we talking about this game franchise on Film Theory today? Well, I was both excited and terrified
the show,
to hear
yeah.
that they were adapting the series into a television show over on Amazon Prime. Would it live up to the franchise's highest heights or be broken and janky? Well, I'm happy to say that the Fallout show is more Last of Us than Halo, a faithful adaptation that features all of the same brutal comedy and social commentary that makes Fallout so special.
Listen to me. Hollywood is the past. Forget Hollywood. The future, my friend, is products.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I will give them credit. the Fallout show looks beautiful. Like, the makeup, the costumes, the props, the armor, the power armor looks great. I mean, granted, there are some things about it, the whole flippy down mask thing. That's weird that they decided to make that, given that we've literally never seen anybody ever do that ever in the games. Again, it's more like, again, there are a lot of good points in the story. It's not perfect, though. I will give it that.
A product, I'm a product. The end of the world is a product.
All while using art directly out of the games and being a pretty dang good TV show on top of it. I have to say, I did get some pretty good feelings on this one when they proudly proclaimed to be from the studio who brought us free 2-day shipping. It just feels so Fallout.
Oh my gosh, Lee. Lee, are you stealing another one of my franchises?
No. Get out of here, Tom. This one's mine. I was there when Fisto told me to assume the position, when there were cars falling out of the sky in Fallout 4. I've spent more time modding these games than some people have spent playing them, Tom. Come back and get mad when I steal Minecraft or something, I don't know. Regardless, while most of the Fallout show takes place a full 2 centuries after the end of the world, the opening scene decides to do something a little bit different, instead starting the day the bombs fell. Here, one of our protagonists, Cooper Howard, sees the blasts ignite all across the Los Angeles skyline. Desperate to get to safety, Cooper and his daughter head for the Hollywood Hills. It's a chilling scene. Los Angeles is more or less wiped off the face of the map. Neighbors and friends
the boneyard.
Everyone is running for their lives. But of course, I wouldn't be a very good theorist if scenes like this didn't also trigger my scientific curiosity. After all, Cooper and his daughter are awfully close to some of these explosions, and it made me think, could they even survive this? Would Cooper have even had the opportunity to make it past this day and link up with the other characters in the show? I just had to dig into it, and after running the numbers...
Yeah, because even in the beginnings of Fallout 4, where the lone survivor survives, they're hit by the first shockwave, or I guess the beginnings of it. I don't know the proper term for it, but they're hit. They miss the shockwave coming to hit them with mere seconds. Not even, fractions of a second even. I mean, the bombs here at the very least look like they're a fair bit closer than the one you see in the Fallout 4 opening.
Well, the answer shocked me, and it's gonna blow this show wide open. See, loyal theorists, if you look at this scene, you'll find that the world that this show, that the entire Fallout franchise sets up, is a lie. More likely than not, none of these characters in the opening scene would have made it, Cooper included, and few of the future characters would have even had the opportunity to be born. The fallout of Fallout would have been much worse than even this series could have imagined. So step into your power armor, friends. We're headed into the wasteland to find out why. To start, let's all catch ourselves up on what we're talking about here. First off, the show is actually set in the same canon as the games, which itself is a challenge since most of the games all have multiple endings, but that's a headache for another day.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem there. Again, these games are RPGs.
Regardless, the show also has the distinction of being amongst some of the earliest and the latest content we see in the Fallout timeline. Yeah, though the main events of the show take place in 2296, around 9 years after the events of Fallout 4, there are numerous flashbacks that take place in or before 2077 and the Great War that destroyed the world. And though this isn't the first time we've seen the bombs drop in the franchise, it is the best look at the devastating event that the series has offered to date. Because of that, we can now do all sorts of cool stuff, like figure out exactly how bad these bombs would have been for the world, and specifically
pretty bad, I'd imagine.
Let's start out by figuring out exactly where the bombs dropped in this scene. This part of the show takes place in Los Angeles, and we get a nice aerial shot as 3 nukes are detonated over the city. This right here gives us all of the info we need to pinpoint these explosions, all thanks to this building. That there in the corner of this shot is the Griffith Observatory, a famous landmark that you may recognize from everything from Terminator to La La Land to Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh god, I remember this video.
Davey!
Using this, we can hop on Google Earth and line it up with the show, letting us know that we're here somewhere up in the mountains north of Hollywood. You may also notice that unlike the show, there aren't any skyscrapers here in this part of LA in the real world. But this would still make sense given
it's
that
an
this
alt
portion
history,
of the Fallout
yeah.
timeline takes place a full 50 years after the present day, and that the world of Fallout diverged from our own shortly after World War II. So we can forgive this little bit of artistic license taken with the LA skyline. Regardless, using this information, we can figure figure out roughly where the epicenter of these 3 explosions are. The one closest to Cooper is just southeast of the observatory, putting ground zero right about here in Hollywood. The second explosion is even further southeast, putting it smack dab in downtown LA. And the third explosion off in the distance there is quite a bit further south. I'd estimate that this bomb was dropped straight out of Compton. Finally, the very first bomb that sends Cooper headed for the hills is a bit tougher to identify. But because we can see the edge of it in this aerial shot over on the right, we can use that to estimate that it would be roughly here, just south of Koreatown. Admittedly, that is a bit of a guess based on our limited data, and it may be a few blocks in either direction, but trust me, it won't actually end up mattering that much in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nuke. Precision really doesn't matter.
Okay, now that we've identified where the nukes went off, we need to figure out exactly how high they were in the air when they exploded. But wait, why would they be exploding in the air? Well, we've gone into great detail about this in previous videos, but the long and short of it, detonating an explosive device in the air actually provides far more destructive power versus when it explodes on the ground. This concept is known as an air burst, and it's actually how the atomic bombs deployed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were detonated in World War II. And this mostly tracks with what we see here in Fallout. If you go through this shot here frame by frame, though it's a bit difficult to make out, we can see that the center of the flash, and therefore the explosion, is just over the top of the buildings here in Hollywood. Unfortunately, like we just explained, these buildings aren't actually real, so we can't use them to get an exact measurement of this height. So,
geez, wouldn't that be nice? Just to have information that's just so easy to find every once in a while. But no, they have to have fake buildings there that don't actually exist. I mean, it's like they never think of the theorists.
So what we're gonna do instead is use the tallest building currently in Los Angeles, the Wilshire Grand Center, as a benchmark. This building stands at 1,100 feet or 335 meters tall, which sounds reasonable for an airburst like this. But again, as we will soon see, going a dozen meters up or down isn't gonna change the end result that much. Finally, the last piece of the puzzle we need here is just how powerful these bombs are. The yield or power of bombs this big is measured in terms of just how much TNT it would take to get the same amount of power. So, for context, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of 15 kilotons, or 15,000 tons of TNT. But how big are these bombs in Fallout? Thankfully, this is where the fact that the games in the show take place in the same universe comes in clutch. See,
would you imagine that?
With every copy of the original Fallout 1 was the Vault Dweller's Survival Guide. Basically, it was the player's manual, but written from the point of view of the in-universe vault tech. Man, I miss when games came with cool inserts like this in the box.
I know, that was the best time in gaming. Like, you got this stuff for free just with buying the game. You didn't have to buy like a special edition or something to get it. Ugh.
Regardless, the survival guide explains that, quote, "The yield of a modern strategic warhead is, with few exceptions, now typically in the range of 200 to 750 kilotons. That's actually quite a bit smaller than the biggest bombs the US has today, which sit at around 1.2 megatons or 1,200 kilotons of TNT.
Which, again, as I said, they did that specifically because the smaller bombs actually output more they don't output more fallout, like, which is the radioactive, like, debris from the nuclear explosion. It's because since the blast isn't as big, you don't lose the fallout in... Oh, I'm having a complete brain fart here. It's one of the, like, fast-moving, like, layers in the atmosphere, like, higher up. And, like, if that doesn't happen, it's not carried away where it can eventually either stop being radioactive or be deposited somewhere else where it doesn't, where it's not quite as effective. It's deposited right there.
But using the info from the survival guide, we're gonna say that the 3 smaller explosions we see are towards the bottom of that range, around 200 kilotons in size, while the big bomb that started the whole sequence is at the top of that scale, approximately 750 kilotons. With bombs like that, you can see why they say that war never changes. So, where the bombs fell, how high they were, and how big they were, we can plug all of that into this online tool Nuke Map to simulate exactly how much devastation these bombs would wreak across the City of Angels.
A lot.
And everyone's dead. See what I meant earlier when I said a few meters here or there wasn't ultimately gonna matter? Yeah, but regardless of where Cooper was in these mountains, whether it was at the Griffith Observatory or the Hollywood sign, or basically anywhere in the greater Los Angeles area, he'd be dead long before he knew what hit him, and longer before he could mutate into the ghoulish desperado we see later in the story. Now, we could go into painful detail about exactly what from these explosions would be killing Cooper and his daughter, but honestly, we've talked about about the effects of these sorts of nuclear explosions a lot in the past, and just look at this map. I think the broad strokes are going to cover it just fine. At this range from these explosions, Cooper would have been hit by an overpressure blast wave of just around 4.81 psi. That's enough to break glass and just about enough to burst your eardrum, if he even survived that long for the shockwave to hit. See, the radiant heat from the explosions would have hit him first, traveling at the speed of light, cooking every square inch of his body. Thermal dosages are typically measured in calories per square centimeter, and just so you have a frame of reference, third-degree burns set in at around 8 calories per square centimeter. The first and largest bomb in Koreatown here.
Well, actually, wait a second. I'm trying to remember. I know the whole thing with calories is like they measured like how much it would take to like heat up like 1 cubic centimeter of water 1 degree. So 8 calories. I'm guessing that's like per centimeter of skin. Actually thinking about it, I think I may be getting my math wrong here. I'm gonna have to try to look. Probably gonna have to look that up again.
Fallout would have been hitting Cooper and everyone else at that birthday party with 12.5 calories per square centimeter, which would be almost certainly lethal. While the closest bomb in Hollywood would have followed shortly with another 26.3 calories per square centimeter. They'd basically be instantly cooked by these bombs. And even if Cooper and the rest were somehow able to survive all of that, the ionizing radiation released by the blasts would be getting to them in no time. In just an hour in this post-nuclear LA, Cooper would have been exposed to 1,720 rims, or rads of radiation, enough to incapacitate you in 5 minutes and kill you within days. Again, for a frame of reference, even in the games like Fallout 4, just 1,000 rads is enough to cause your player character to keel over and die on the spot. Clearly, given what we know in Fallout lore and what we see here in the Fallout TV show, Cooper and everyone else we see in this opening scene just being so close to these 200 or 750 kiloton bombs would kill them instantly.
Yeah. But then again, he does turn into a ghoul, and while it's never been officially stated, my whole headcanon is, and I think it's fairly certain, is that whether you become a ghoul is very much like predestined via genetics. Like, I could very much see it that, like, in a normal day, like, you know, these genes aren't going to, you know, activate or anything, and you just live through your life and die. Probably I could almost imagine like the genes for becoming a ghoul, are like, we could probably think of them as junk code. Things that we think of as either being too damaged to activate or, you know, be useless otherwise. But then, like, the radiation hits, and, you know, radiation damages DNA, but maybe the gene for becoming a ghoul is different enough where it actually gets activated by the radiation, and then you slowly turn into a ghoul. And then whether you become a feral ghoul or you keep your sentience is... Again, I've thought about this, and I'm thinking there might be also some level of genetic predisposition for this, but I also think it's like, you know, just helping keep your mind healthy. Like, you know, if you go into complete and utter solitude, you're more likely to become a ghoul just because, you know, being alone for a extended period of time isn't good for humans' brains. So I think that, you know, with the radiation damage as well, that it might be one of those things where, like, unless you're actively taking care of yourself or you're with people to help keep your mental health up and good, you'd slowly degenerate into, like, a feral ghoul, even if you were more predisposed to be, you know, non-feral. I hope I'm making sense with this.
Rupturing their organs, vaporizing their skin, and irradiating their bodies. And normally, I'd be content to leave things here. That's a fun revelation about this show, putting this really cool scene in a new light, using a combination of science and lore.
Surprise, surprise, when the nukes drop, everybody's dead.
This main character is dead, and we can prove it. Classic theorist stuff. But something about this whole thing was still bothering me. As I was watching the show and seeing these explosions, I couldn't help but think that they looked a little, well, small. I've done a surprising amount of research about nuclear explosions during my time here at Theorist, and though I'm no nuclear physicist, I do know that these bombs are supposed to be massive. Like, stretch up into the atmosphere massive. But these explosions are just not that. They're big, don't get me wrong, but they're not as large as they should be. So I decided to dive a little deeper into the data and found an interesting feature over on Nuke Map. See, once you detonate the bombs in the tool, you can export that data to Google Earth and see the scale of the mushroom clouds in all of their glory.
Oh,
But
really?
when I did this for the 200 and 750 kiloton nukes. This is what I got. If this looks like a confusing image to you, fair. It was to me too. It wasn't until I zoomed out that I realized that what we're seeing here, all of that black blob taking up so much of the image, that is the mushroom cloud we should be seeing if these nukes had a yield as powerful as Fallout lore says.
Okay. Well, so that would probably mean, I mean, granted, that's a lot more, accurate to what I would probably say actually happened in the games. But also thinking, if these nukes are smaller, that could very much be, more tactical nukes. Or, maybe the next size up. I don't know what the next size up from tactical is. Because again, I know that, tactical nuclear weapons are a thing in Fallout. I mean, the Fat Man being, the most famous one. But then also, again, in Fallout 4, you had the option to have, to throw, grenades, locator beacons, and a nuclear submarine offshore launches tactical nukes at where you threw the beacon.
Essentially, as he rides his horse on by the Griffith Observatory,
he'd be in the
mushroom cloud of the bomb detonated in Hollywood. And the height of these clouds should be as tall as 18 kilometers. There is simply no way that these bombs we see here in the show are as powerful as the Vault Dweller's survival guide told us. But we can figure out how strong
they
are
said
based on what we
most
see. Yeah,
nukes.
after playing
So
around
these are
with
obviously
Nuke Map
smaller.
a little bit more, I was able to create this, which is far more true to size of the clouds we see in the show. You want to take a wild guess at how powerful these bombs are?
I'm going to say that the kilotons is in the double digits. I'm going to say maybe 50. Maybe 40, actually.
Not 100 kilotons. They're not even 10 kilotons. In fact, the smaller bombs here have a yield of just 100 tons. 150th the power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And the bigger bomb detonated in the show here in Koreatown ended up just a little bit bigger, but even still, it was just a single kiloton of TNT. On the scale of nuclear explosions that we've seen in the media and in the real world, that is insanely small.
Again, these are most likely the tactical weapons. Again, I don't want to spoil, the whole thing that they talk about in the show, but let's say that this was, China getting ready to invade. They could have been using, tactical nukes, and then, could have probably wanted to invade more traditionally afterwards. But then again, I know that's not the case in the show.
Now, don't get me wrong. For the city of Los Angeles, these explosions are still going to be devastating. The city would be in rough shape, no two ways about it. But for the vast majority of Los Angelinos, they'd have plenty of time to hop in their cars or on their horses to escape. In fact, not only would Cooper totally survive this sort of blast up in the hills of Hollywood at the Griffith Observatory, but he'd likely experience no negative side effects whatsoever if he stayed clear of the fallout headed downwind. And what's more, this isn't even a case of these explosions being significantly smaller than the other ones we've seen throughout the Fallout franchise. Both the bomb in Fallout 3's Megaton quest and the explosion from Fallout 4's prologue are in line with the ones we see here in the Fallout TV show. So, does that mean that these super powerful, civilization-ending nuclear explosions might not have been as world-shatteringly powerful as we see from various bits of Fallout media? That the world maybe shouldn't have been as devastated as we see in the games and in the show? Honestly, yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, the creators of the Fallout franchise did consider this back in the day. According to the Vault Dweller's survival guide, though the yields of the nuclear bombs were smaller than the biggest bombs we have today, they did release far more nuclear fallout than expected. And what we see here in the show are just 4 of potentially thousands, or tens of thousands of bombs that hit the US during the Great War. In fact, we know from dialogue in Fallout New Vegas that 77 nukes were launched at Vegas and its surrounding area alone. aimed at just that
77.
one city. So yeah, things would have been bad even with the smaller nukes. But with all of that being said, ignoring the idea that the bombs in Fallout released more radiation than expected, let me ask you this. In the real world with real nukes, how long do you think society would need to remain in their shelters and vaults before it was safe to come out again?
I'd say, I mean, given that what we know about Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I'd say probably half a decade, maybe? I think.
10 years? 100 years? 200? Never? Well, what if I told you that it could actually be as little as just a few weeks? Yeah, weeks. See, when we think of nuclear disasters, the things that typically come to mind are Chernobyl or Fukushima, where radiation levels can still be problematic decades after the initial incidents. Meltdowns like those, radioactive uranium and plutonium are leaked into the local environment. And unfortunately, those elements have high half-lives. The amount of time it takes for just half of the radioactive atoms to dissipate. It can take tens of thousands, or even hundreds of millions of years for those elements to become inert. So for us humans, that basically means that there will be dangerous amounts of radiation at those disaster sites forever. But things are different when it comes to
an actual bomb, yeah.
When a nuclear bomb goes off, the uranium and plutonium powering the bomb is quickly converted into energy and dozens of other radioactive isotopes. And thankfully, most of these isotopes have relatively tiny half-lives, with radiation levels falling off more than 50% after just 1 hour and 99% after just 48. Basically, for every 7-fold increase in time, there's a 10-fold decrease in radioactivity. After about a few weeks, radiation levels are likely as low as they're gonna be for a long time, and should be safe enough for humanity to emerge from their vaults to either flee or rebuild. Don't believe me? Well, we can look at real-world examples like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those cities were being rebuilt just a few months after the bombs fell, and today radiation levels in both are basically no higher than they are anywhere else in the world. And if you want an example that's a bit closer to home, you could spend an entire year at the ground zero of Oppenheimer's Trinity test and be exposed to entirely normal and safe levels of radiation. Now, do not misunderstand me. Any amount of nuclear conflict is not good. These explosions suck for humanity, for civilization, for anyone and anything. And even if the amount of radioactive fallout were a fraction of the devastation we see in the games and the show, that would cause irreversible damage to the Earth and our fellow human beings. And remember, according to Fallout lore, the bombs released more radiation than expected. But still, the big takeaway here, if the bombs were as big as what we can see with our own eyes here in this series, here in this scene from the show, it wouldn't be as bad as the Fallout franchise wants us to believe. But that's not to say that it wouldn't still be the end of civilization as we know it, both in the real world and in Fallout.
Well, that's part of the thing too, because like, yeah, I mean, the nukes were bad, obviously. But another thing you have to realize is that pre-war America, and actually a lot of the pre-war world, was in major strife. I mean, like, America was actually one of the better places in the world purely because they had successfully like weaned themselves off, mostly at least, off of like the need for oil and stuff like that, which pre-war Fallout they were running out of. Like, the whole thing with like the conflict between America and China was because America claimed claimed a deep water deposit of like crude, like possibly one of the last in the world, or at least in Fallout. And China also wanted it, and that's how the fighting started. The rest of the world was actually actively falling apart, and again, America was still experiencing itself. Like, there were the beginnings of resource shortages, like strikes, all sort of civil strife and stuff like that. So it might have been that, under normal circumstances, the US government could have survived, the nuking, and picked up the pieces and begun rebuilding. But stuff, like, basically everything was under so much tension before the bombs dropped that when it finally did, everything just exploded and fell apart, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, one last twist of the nuclear knife here, but even if the explosions and resulting radiation wouldn't destroy the world, the long-term effects of the bombs still totally could.
Oh, yeah.
Along with the sheer destructive power of the nuclear explosions, the energy of the bombs would likely cause many large fires. This, in turn, would result in a lot of smoke, and with thousands of fires across the entire
Nuclear
United
winter.
States, if not the entire world, billions of pounds of soot and ash are going to be released into the atmosphere. See, the sun would only need to be blocked just like a teeny tiny little bit to lower the average temperature of the world by a few degrees Celsius, enough to have an irreversible effect on our climate. So, unlike what we see here in Fallout with a hot nuclear desert wasteland, it's far more likely that the planet would enter a nuclear winter. This in turn would devastate many of the crops that we're able to grow, with some models of nuclear war projecting that some 80% of the world population would die of starvation. Something very similar actually happened in the real world in the year 1816, known as the Year Without a Summer.
Right,
in
yeah.
1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted and released particulates into the atmosphere that blocked enough sunlight from reaching Earth to temporarily lower the temperature by a couple of degrees. Because of this, for much of the world, summer did not come the next year. Crops failed across Europe and the United States, with millions struggling to find food, all from just one volcano. Now multiply that by the atomic fire of thousands or even tens of thousands of nuclear bombs. This right here, that's a major part of why nuclear war is such an existential threat. Yes, the initial explosions might kill unfathomable numbers of people, and the radiation would have long-term dangerous side effects, but that's assuming we even get that far. The Fallout series has never been one to sugarcoat how awful such an apocalypse would be. Obviously, this is a world I would not want to live in. But what we see in this show and in the games, a world that has recovered enough to have cities and settlements like Shady Sands in Philly, Diamond City and Megaton, even that might be too optimistic an outlook. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory.
And cut.
Oh god, yeah. Again, I mean, like, there's a lot of these. I mean, that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Like, a lot of these, video game worlds are not something you'd actively want to actually, live in. I mean, what? The ones I can think off the top of my head, Cyberpunk, BioShock, either one of them. Because, there's the Fallout Infinite and regular BioShock, Fallout. A lot of them are, in a world that, I very much like being a tourist in. I like seeing them. I like hanging around and seeing all the sights and yada yada. I even, I like going around and helping people, but I would absolutely hate living in those actual worlds. But yeah, of course, with all that out of the way, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my game theory reaction. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.